Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Before we start today's discussion, we have a very important announcement. As you saw in the trailer, Unacademy is hosting the UPSC Summit on the 20th and 21st of July, where we are bringing together top politicians, diplomats and bureaucrats and retired officials, along with eminent personalities to help you in the journey of your UPSC preparation. From the likes of Nitin Gadkari to Annamalai to several other eminent personalities would be delivering lectures on the Unacademy app. All you have to do is register for this event using the link provided in the description, and we hope you make use of this initiative. And also please note, we are starting a new program, a new special class on the Unacademy app, which is absolutely free of cost. Shyam sir will be taking up Economy for Beginners from 15th of July at 12 p.m. So do enroll for this program. All you have to do is log into the Unacademy app and visit Shyam sir's profile link and enroll for this upcoming batch where Shyam sir will be teaching the basics of Indian economy. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the articles that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of The Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles for a detailed analysis. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from all these initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's look at article number 1. On the front page of the Delhi edition and as well as on page number 12, we have a very important article related to the internal political developments that are taking place in our neighboring country, that is Nepal. According to the news report, Nepal's Prime Minister Prachanda, Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda, who's the leader of a political party called the Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist Center. This party was in power. It had formed a coalition government with the support of another faction of the Communist Party of Nepal called the Unified Marxist-Leninist outfit. So these two communist factions in Nepal had formed a coalition government, and Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda was the Prime Minister of the country. But the only constant in Nepal has always been the changes in government and leadership. In fact, over the last few years, multiple governments have fallen, many different prime ministers have come and gone, and as a result, Nepal has always witnessed political instability and constant changes in government and leadership. So the same is repeating again. The coalition partner, Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist, withdrew the support, and it has aligned with the Nepali Congress, which is another major political outfit in Nepal. Nepali Congress has the largest number of seats in the Nepali parliament, and these two parties have now formed an alliance under the leadership of K P Sharma Oli. So in all likelihood, K P Oli is likely to return as the Prime Minister of Nepal, because the incumbent Prime Minister Prachanda lost the trust vote. There was a vote of confidence in the parliament, and since the coalition partner had withdrawn the support, Prachanda could not establish majority on the floor of the house, and as a result, Prachanda has resigned. So the new coalition between Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist and Nepali Congress under the leadership of K P Oli will stake claim with the President of Nepal to form a new government, and most likely K P Oli is likely to return as the Prime Minister of Nepal. Now many of you might be wondering, why are we discussing this topic? Why are we focusing on the internal political developments of Nepal, and how is it relevant for the exam? Now let me explain why the topic is extremely important. See, first of all, Nepal is a neighboring country of India. So whatever happens in our neighborhood directly affects India's interests, be it political instability or economic crisis or a security situation. Any adverse development in our neighborhood has an immediate bearing on India's national interests. And more importantly, Nepal's politics is directly linked to India. Internal political developments of Nepal, they've always had an impact on India's interests. These developments which are happening, and especially the possible return of KP Oli as the new Prime Minister, is something that concerns India. India has had a bitter experience previously when KP Oli was the Prime Minister of the country. He has already served 2 short terms in the last few years, and both the times KP Oli was a problematic leader for India as Indian interests were severely compromised. So that is exactly what we need to understand in detail in today's discussion. We have to understand what it means for India to experience the return of KP Oli and to again witness political instability in Nepal. So what does this entail for Indian interests? That is exactly what we need to understand. So let's dive a little deep into this topic and let's understand why Nepal is such a crucial neighboring country. If you look at the map itself explains why Nepal is so significant for India. Because geopolitics is all about geography of a place. In fact, if you look at what is geopolitics, it's nothing but the impact of geography of a place on the politics of the region. How geography influences the international relations and politics of a region is nothing but geopolitics. So when I say geography, it refers to both human geography and physical geography. The physical geography of a place and human geography of a place. They both can influence the politics and the international relations of that particular place. So if you look at Nepal and look at its physical geography, it's a Himalayan state and it is sandwiched between 2 large Asian neighbors, India and China, right? The northern part of Nepal is largely comprised of the towering Himalayan mountains. The southern part of Nepal is a plain area that extends into India. This is the Terai belt, the Terai region, where you find a ethnic community called the Madhes people or the Madhesis. The Madhesis are closely linked with India, especially in the border areas in UP and also in Bihar. The Madhes families of Nepal from the Terai region, they marry into Indian families, meaning they have marital relations. So there exists a close cultural bond between the Terai belt of Nepal and the border villages of UP and Bihar. So that is a close cultural connection. It's a human geographical element. And the Madhesis of Nepal always have had issues with the Nepali government, with other majority dominant groups like the Pahadis. The Pahadis have been the dominant class in Nepal's politics. And ever since Nepal was a monarchy, since then Madhesis have felt that they have been discriminated. Even today, Madhesis have a demand that they don't have equitable representation in the Nepali parliament. So India takes up the cause of the Madhesis because of this close cultural link. And also don't forget, this is a political electoral issue as well in UP and Bihar. So the Indian government always looks at the concerns of the Madhes people and we often advocate their concerns and bring pressure on Nepal to protect the interests of the Madhes people. So this has often created friction between India and Nepal because Nepal sees this as India's interference in its internal affairs. Nepal has complained of excessive Indian internal interference in its internal matters, and this has always complicated our relations. So it's because of all these reasons that these issues become very important for our exams as well. See, if you look at Nepal, these are the border states. You have Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal and Sikkim. These are the states of India which border Nepal. And historically, we share a civilizational connect from Hinduism and also Buddhism. These 2 religions have always bound India and Nepal together, right? And you should also understand that Nepal has played a very big role even during the colonial period. The British, they set up Nepal and other Himalayan kingdoms as buffer states to safeguard the Indian colony, which was their prized asset. Because the British anticipated a possible Russian threat back in 1800s and early 1900s. And they anticipated a possible Russian invasion from the north. And since British India was the most prized asset for the crown, They set up the Himalayan kingdoms from Tibet to Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan. All these Himalayan kingdoms were set up as a buffer state to shield India, to protect India from any possible security threats from the north. This buffer strategy was continued by India as well post-independence. After 1947, the then Nehru government built very close relations with Nepal. Nepal was a monarchy back then. You should also understand that Nepal was a theological state. It was a Hindu state, the only Hindu state in the world. It was ruled by the Rana dynasty, the Rana clan, which shared very close ties with India. The Rana royals, they have always shared close historical cultural links with India. So naturally, this relationship was continued post-independence, and India and Nepal became very close friends. Nepal, which was landlocked, was dependent on India. If you again saw the map, if you understood the physical geography, you can see that Nepal is a landlocked country. It does not have access to the sea. So it would depend on India for all essential supplies, and it would depend on India to access the sea. So right from the beginning, India would provide all possible support to Nepal, from financial assistance to even supply of weapons, infrastructure development, and supply of essential items like medicines, fuel, etc. So the Nehru government and subsequent governments built very close relations with the monarchy, and we had a fantastic relationship for a couple of decades. In fact, this relationship was cemented in 1950 by signing the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship laid the foundation for this relationship, where India continued to see Nepal as a buffer against any possible threat from China. Because the PRC, which was established by 1949, the People's Republic of China, was becoming an expansionist, aggressive power. By 1949-1950, China had annexed Tibet, Xinjiang, and Inner Mongolia. So the aggressive expansion of China threatened all the small Himalayan kingdoms. Please remember, Sikkim also at that point was an independent kingdom, which was just under the protectorate of India. Bhutan and Nepal, all these small Himalayan kingdoms were worried when China got aggressive against Tibet. India was concerned about China's aggressive moves. So India cultivated Nepal, Sikkim, and Bhutan as buffer states by drawing from the British strategy. We cemented the relationship by signing the 1949 treaty, and we even established open borders between India and Nepal. Now, this is a unique aspect of our relationship. We don't have fully open borders with any other country. With Bhutan, we have partially open borders. It basically means it provides for free movement of people, goods, and vehicles. You don't need a passport or a visa to go to Nepal as an Indian citizen. Similarly, Nepali citizens don't need a visa to come to India. It's a fully open border. There is free trade between India and Nepal, and free movement of vehicles and goods and even investments. Nepal depends on the Indian economy. Its currency is tagged to the Indian rupee. Even our digital payment gateways like UPI have been extended and implemented in Nepal. That is the kind of close link that exists from 1947 till date. So everything was going very well in this relationship. But when Sikkim merged with India in 1974, this caused concern for Nepal's monarchy. Because see, India has always seen Nepal through the prism of China. China's aggression in Tibet and the boundary dispute that developed, and eventually the war we fought with China, obviously drove India to focus on the region from a strategic point of view, and we always were worried about China's aggressive moves in the region. So as India got more defensive and more proactive as far as its military strategy was concerned, these small kingdoms started getting worried. And Sikkim, when it merged with India, there were accusations that India forced the merger of Sikkim. It was alleged that India's intelligence agency, RAW, which had been recently set up in 1968 by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, it was blamed for the crisis in Sikkim within the Chogyal dynasty, which pushed Sikkim to join India eventually. Though India denied these allegations, and even though the involvement has never been proven and India has never acknowledged it, it's widely believed that India played a role in the destabilization of Chogyal dynasty in Sikkim, which led to Sikkim's merger with India. So when this development occurred, This caused Nepal's monarchy to worry about India's intentions. Since Sikkim was another small Himalayan kingdom, which India had now brought under its own union, Nepal started getting worried about India's intentions as well, even though India had no such intention. This led to the development of mistrust, and it pushed Nepal to start getting closer to China, particularly from 1970s. China was looking for such an opening because India firmly had established its influence all across this region. Especially after the 1962 war, China was looking to destabilize India. It had already started backing insurgencies in the northeast. It had developed a nexus with Pakistan. So China was looking for new openings in the region, and Nepal was of utmost importance. Because Mao Zedong, he believed in the five fingers policy. He believed that Tibet can be firmly controlled by China only if China can dominate the five fingers of Tibet, which is nothing but the five extensions of Tibet. Which are these five extensions? These are nothing but the small Himalayan kingdoms. According to Mao Zedong's strategy, if Tibet is like the palm of your hand, then there are five extensions or five fingers to Tibet. This is Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Arunachal Pradesh. That is the reason why China has always obsessed about these Himalayan regions, and it has meddled in these regions. It has a boundary issue with Bhutan even today. It has boundary issues with India in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. It claims the whole of Arunachal for itself. And similarly, Nepal, China has active interests. Plus, after the Tibetan uprising in 1950s, the Tibetan refugees had taken shelter, not just in India, but also in Nepal. So this was of concern for China. China wanted to monitor the activities of Tibetan refugees who were seen as anti-national elements by the Chinese state. So driven by these interests, China was trying to influence Nepal, and it was trying to undercut Indian influence. So as Nepal was worried about India's intentions, China started utilizing this opportunity, and Nepal and China started getting slightly closer to each other. So this has always been the case between India, Nepal, and China. There is this great game going on where India tries to keep Nepal under its influence. China tries to counter this, leading to a strategic competition. And several Nepali politicians and political parties which emerged later, they have capitalized on this, and they keep playing one country against the other. So some parties and leaders, they deliberately favor India so that they can put China on the back foot and get concessions from China. And they play the same game with India. They deliberately get closer to China and promote anti-India sentiments so that they can force India to give concessions and funds and be in favor of these parties and leaders. So this has been a challenge for India, a diplomatic strategic challenge for India. So in 1980s, the Madhes issue was exploding. Madhesis were fighting for equal rights. And India, which was now looking to counter the rising Chinese influence, would extend support to the Madhesi cause, leading to internal problems in Nepal. Madhesis would protest and block the roads between India and Nepal, which would cripple Nepal's economy. So this economic crisis caused by the Madhesi protests, who were blocking the roads between India and Nepal, it pushed the monarchy to introduce some changes in 1990, and Nepal became a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy would remain in power, but democracy in a limited way was introduced. Political parties were allowed to be formed. Elections were introduced, and Nepal transitioned into a constitutional monarchy. It was not still a democracy, it was not still a secular country. It was still a Hindu state, a Hindu monarchy with some constitutional features. So eventually this divide, this internal social and political divide in Nepal triggered the Maoist civil war in 1990s. The Communist Party of Nepal was formed, which today is in power, by the way. And according to India, it was alleged that China was supporting the Communist Party of Nepal. The Maoist faction was backed allegedly by China, because China obviously had a direct interest in fanning and spreading Maoist ideology. China was indeed playing a role in the spread of Maoism in India as well, which took root as Naxalism in 1967. Similarly, China exported this extremist ideology, left-wing extremist ideology to Nepal and backed the Communist Party of Nepal, the Maoist faction, to trigger a civil war that consumed the country. For almost a decade, from 1990s to 2005-2006, Nepal was completely consumed by this conflict between the government, the army on one side, and the Maoist rebels on the other side. So this is where India played a critical role. It was important to stabilize the country and ensure that Chinese influence is countered. So India not only supported the monarchy, the government and the army, we supplied weapons as well to Nepali army during the conflict, and it's reported that we even worked with the Maoists. India built its own contacts with the Communist Party of Nepal and its leader Prachanda. For some of you this might be shocking. So Prachanda, who was the Prime Minister till the other day, at one point was a Maoist rebel. And India, to undercut Chinese influence, built contacts with the Maoist leaders, and we started working with all the factions. And eventually it was India which brought the civil war to an end. It was India which ended the civil war by 2005-2006, and we negotiated the 12-point peace agreement. This is how India played a positive role in stabilizing the country and in ending the civil war and the conflict. Following this, Nepal transitioned. The monarchy by then had witnessed a major crisis. The monarchy stepped down and Nepal adopted constitutional democracy. It finally became a full-fledged democratic state. It became a secular republic state. And in 2008, it even held elections to its new parliament. So since then, it began the process of drafting a new constitution, because the old constitution was of no use, because it was drafted under a constitutional monarchy, and Nepal at that point was still a theological state. So to ensure that Nepal fully transitions into a democratic secular republic, a new constitution was necessary, and this constitution drafting process began. So India thought on one side that most issues are resolved, that we will be able to protect our interests. But unfortunately, things got worse from here onwards, because the constitution making process dragged for many years. It took Nepal 7 years to draft and adopt a new constitution. And throughout this period, India was blamed by various political parties and leaders in Nepal for interfering in its constitution making process. Because India's concern was the Madhesis should be equitably represented. The Madhesis were demanding inclusive representation in the new parliament. They were asking for more seats. They were asking for a new federal structure, for more states to be created in the Terai belt. And India supported these demands of the Madhesis and put pressure on various parties and leaders in Nepal to include these features in the new constitution. But this was seen as India's interference in Nepal's internal affairs and in its constitution making process. And this led to the rise of anti-India sentiments. In fact, from 1990s itself, anti-India sentiments had become stronger. Ever since India supported the Madhesi cause, and this led to an economic crisis in the 80s and 90s. Since then, anti-India sentiments had increased. In fact, this had even been exploited by Pakistan as well to create a terror base in Nepal. If you remember the hijacking of IC-814 and many other terror attacks that happened, Nepal became an easy route. The India-Nepal border became a major security concern. It was not only the Maoists who were infiltrating and connecting with Naxals in India, but organized criminals who were involved in drug smuggling, arms trafficking, wildlife trafficking, and even Pakistani agents from the ISI and from terrorist groups. They would easily infiltrate by exploiting the open borders between the two countries. So very quickly, Nepal was becoming a security threat. The border had become volatile, and we were witnessing the rise of anti-India sentiments, also because India was allegedly interfering in the internal matters of the country. So several political leaders, including K P Sharma Oli, exploited these sentiments. K P Sharma Oli, who leads Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist, would build his political future based on these anti-India sentiments. He would promote the Nepali identity, build pride amongst Nepali people, and he would blame India for all the problems. and turn this into a political electoral campaign. So in 2015, finally Nepal adopted a new constitution and fresh elections were held. But India was not entirely happy with the new constitution because the Madhesi issue was not addressed. The Pahadis who were present amongst all the parties, they wouldn't provide equal representation for Madhesis, and India was not satisfied with the new constitution. So Madhesis again blocked the roads in 2015. They protested. And this again caused an economic crisis in Nepal. Nepal again witnessed a major economic crisis because of the blockade of the roads by the Madhesi protesters, and it was alleged that India was supporting them, even though India denied any support to these protests. So based on these allegations, anti-India sentiments became even stronger and leaders like K P Oli became very popular. So in 2016 and also in 2019, K P Oli became the Prime Minister of the country for 2 terms. So he has been the PM for 2 short terms, and both the times he has adopted an anti-India position and, more worryingly, a pro-China position. So this is what bothers India. This is what concerns India. As soon as K P Oli came to power, he cancelled many Indian projects and involved China in a greater way. K P Oli signed the Belt and Road Initiative and joined this initiative with China. China came up with ambitious road and railway projects, and China became a critical weapon supplier as well. China has brought in massive investments into the country. It has invested in hydropower. It has invested in road and rail infrastructure. And China also plays a role in the telecom sector as well. So all these are major security concerns for India. For example, Nepal's mobile and internet infrastructure is closely linked with India's telecom and digital infrastructure, because historically it is India which has built the telecom infrastructure of Nepal. Now the involvement of Chinese companies is a security threat, because this could allow Chinese intelligence agencies to potentially hack into Indian networks by using the Nepali networks, which are interlinked with Indian networks. China has proposed some ambitious road and rail projects which could bring China to the doorstep of India-Nepal border as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. China has made big investments in hydropower projects, and it has even gotten ahead of India. It has been involved in many cultural projects as well. So this leads to a direct competition between India and China, and there are major interests for India present over here. Just look at the map here. This map is showing you the proposed projects between China and Nepal as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. China is looking to connect Tibet, its capital Lhasa, with Kathmandu through a railway line. And it wants to expand the rail and road network right till the borders with India. So potentially during, let's say, a possible war between India and China, Chinese troops, the PLA, could rely on this road and railway network and could target India along the India-Nepal border. This has been a strategic concern for India's strategic establishment. China has become one of the biggest investors in the country, and you can see the kind of competition that goes on between India and China in Nepal. So this is the reason why change in government in Nepal is so important for us. Understanding the internal politics, the history, the background is critical to track the current developments which are happening. I'll end this discussion by pointing out another concerning development that occurred recently in 2020, when K P Oli had again become the Prime Minister. For another short term, K P Oli became the Prime Minister in 2019-2020. During this short term, he again created problems for India by opening a very old border issue that we had. Since the British era, there has been a minor boundary dispute between India and Nepal. See, please understand that the British never integrated the Kingdom of Nepal into British India. Right? In the Anglo-Nepalese wars of 1830s, the British defeated the Kingdom of Nepal, but they never annexed the territory. Why? Because they followed the buffer strategy. They gave limited autonomy to these Himalayan kingdoms so that they could create a buffer to safeguard their colony in India. So even though Kingdom of Nepal was autonomous and not part of British India, the British controlled all the critical issues, including the security related issues. So following the Anglo-Nepalese War, they signed the Treaty of Sugoi in 1834. The Treaty of Sugoi was signed between British India and the Kingdom of Nepal. This brought the Anglo-Nepalese War to an end. It granted autonomy to the Kingdom of Nepal, and it established the boundaries between British India and the then Kingdom of Nepal. So the British drew the boundaries, and we inherited these boundaries after independence. And while drawing these boundaries, there were few errors that were made. So as always, the British would leave behind a legacy, and their colonial blunders, they cause issues not just in South Asia today, but even around the world. Look at the Israel-Palestine issue, look at all the conflicts in Africa. Most of them have a colonial origin. It's very similar to how all the conflicts in South Asia as well have a colonial origin. So because of the mistakes done during the boundary resolution between British India and Kingdom of Nepal, there were few minor issues. At Kala Pani region, which is present today in Uttarakhand, in India's Uttarakhand, and also at another place bordering Bihar. At these two places, the boundary was not clearly resolved. Rather, very ad hoc methods were used to resolve the boundary. And post-independence, since we inherited these British era boundaries, those minor boundary issues remained between India and Nepal. It was always a minor issue. India and Nepal generally had good relations, so we never made this a big controversy. We had even set up a boundary working group, a joint boundary working group. We had conducted some surveys as well in the 80s and 90s. And we had made attempts to resolve this small boundary issue. But unfortunately, the lack of political will, both in India and Nepal, had led to the continuation of the issue, and it had never been resolved. But until 2020, it was always a minor issue between the two countries. But in 2020, KP Oli escalated the issue and turned this into a major boundary dispute between India and Nepal. See, Kala Pani is part of the Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand. It is strategically vital for India because this is where the Lipu Lake Pass is located. The strategic Lipu Lake Pass, which is present at the junction of India, Nepal and China. So as far as India-China tensions are concerned, Lipu Lake is crucial because India has a major military presence at Lipu Lake. We have built a strategic road as well in this Kala Pani region that links with the Lipu Lake Pass. But Nepal objected to the new maps that India published in 2019. After Jammu Kashmir was reorganized into two new union territories, India published new political maps. And as always, we showed Kala Pani region as Indian territory. That is when KP Oli raised the issue, objected to the new maps of India, and Nepal's parliament adopted a constitutional amendment claiming that Kala Pani belongs to Nepal. Even though the understanding was that Kala Pani remains under Indian control, even though it's disputed. And both sides had agreed that we will resolve this at a later date through mutual talks and negotiations. But Nepal deliberately created problems, and this increased the tensions as well. Nepal would go on to claim this entire region from Kala Pani to Limpiadura. Recently, you might know it has published notes as well, currency notes, which contains the new map of Nepal showing that Kala Pani and the Limpiadura region as part of its sovereignty. Now, can you find out the other disputed region? Towards the borders with Nepal and Bihar, there is another small region which is disputed between India and Nepal. So, can you find out the name of this disputed place and mention that in the comments? So, whenever KP Oli has come to power, there have been problems for India. He has adopted a pro-China position and anti-India position. That is what concerns India. And now, we are likely to see a return of this because Prachanda has again stepped down after losing the trust vote. The coalition government has fallen. In fact, this was a government which was formed recently, just one and a half years ago. Prior to this, the coalition government was between the Maoist faction of the Communist Party and Nepali Congress. Nepali Congress historically has been close to India. Prachanda, the one-time rebel leader, Maoist leader, has also been close to India. So India works well with these parties. For us, the problem is the unified Marxist-Leninist faction headed by KP Oli. So around a year ago, Prachanda broke this coalition government and aligned with KP Oli's faction and had formed a new coalition government. Since then, India was worried, India was concerned, but still it was okay as Prachanda was still the Prime Minister. But now this coalition has fallen apart and a true nightmare is coming true where KP Oli is now aligning with Nepali Congress and they are staking a claim to form the government. There are also worries that Nepal might be returned back to the pre-1990s constitution. There are few elements in Nepal's politics who want to re-establish the monarchy. They basically want to erode democracy, bring back monarchy and even authoritarianism. And this is what concerns India, worries India, and that is why we need to closely watch all these developments. So it is an elaborate discussion we have had, but trust me, the topic is very crucial because whatever happens in the neighborhood is extremely important for our interests. So please take up this practice question. Government change has been the only constant in Nepal. Discuss how the frequent change in Nepal's political leadership and internal political turmoil has affected India's interests. So, how can you write a good answer for this question? In the introduction, talk about the frequent political instability that Nepal has witnessed. Because that is how the question is starting here. There is a statement which says government change has been the only constant in Nepal. So you can point out that since 1980s till date, Nepal has always seen political instability in some form or the other. Be it the civil war, the transition to a constitutional democratic secular republic, the delay in constitution making, and the repeated change in governments and leadership. Believe it or not, since 2008, there have been 12 different prime ministers that Nepal has got. So this political instability is connected to the broader competition between India and China. That is what you need to bring out in the introduction. Nepal has gone through decades of political instability because of its internal issues and the alleged involvement of India and China in meddling with the internal affairs of Nepal. Why? Because there is a competition going on between the two neighbors of Nepal, the two Asian giants. Then in the body, you can talk about the adverse developments that have happened for India. You can talk about the historical friendly relations we have shared, but how things have changed whenever pro-China regimes have come in place in Nepal. Right? Discuss the Belt and Road Initiative, the Chinese investments and projects, the boundary issue. Talk about the impact that these changes have had on India's interests. Talk about the Madesi issue. And finally, conclude your answer. In the conclusion, you need to point out that India should be mindful of the allegations that we have excessively interfered in Nepal, because many analysts, experts and even former diplomats agree that to an extent India has excessively interfered in Nepal's politics. So you can suggest that India should be mindful of these concerns that few Nepali leaders have expressed, but at the same time we need to protect our strategic interests, especially against the threats posed by China. So you have to present both sides of the argument and mention that India can take a more balanced approach. Maybe we should not interfere in Nepal's constitution, in Nepal's politics directly. Maybe we should just provide moral support to the Madesi cause and nothing beyond that. At the same time, we should continue insisting that Nepal shouldn't be a ground from where China will target India. India needs to protect its security interests and India has every right to put that pressure on Nepal. So that provides a more balanced argument, and I think that would make a good rounded answer for this given question. Now let's look at the next article. It's a very small discussion, but it's very relevant for Indian economy. We have a column that talks about the impact of PDS, public distribution system, which has been absolutely crucial for food security in the country. Through the PDS, as you know, free food grains are distributed. Free food grains and few subsidized food items. They are distributed to the poor, to the BPL families, the below poverty line households in the country. And this has been one of the most critical social welfare programs which has been run by the government of India. Under the National Food Security Act, the government has promised right to food, and PDS is the delivery platform for that, to ensure that food security is achieved by the distribution of free and subsidized food grains. According to data, almost 75% of our rural population and 50% of our urban population, they are dependent on the PDS system as far as food security is concerned, which is a guaranteed legal right under the National Food Security Act. So here the article is focused on a recent research which has been conducted based on data brought out by the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. I'm sure you would have read about the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. Shyam sir has covered the topic many times in various sessions. So this survey, which was published recently for 2022-23, it provides data with regard to household level consumption expenditure. That is, what's the money being spent at the household level, what's the expenditure being incurred, and what kind of consumption is being done at the household level. This consumption includes the expenditure on not just food items, but also non-food essentials like health, education, etc. So the PDS program, according to the researchers and the writers of this article, has been a very critical social security tool which has guaranteed food security for a large population, for a large segment of our population. So here they are relying upon the data of Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, and they are trying to establish interconnections with poverty line, with poverty data, and they are trying to draw out the social impact, the overall social impact of a scheme like the PDS. So let's understand this article in slight detail. See, when you have a food security scheme like PDS, where free food grains are being distributed, or at least subsidized food items are being provided, essentially the households, especially the poor households, they will be left with more money in their hands, which now they can spend on other food items and non-food items. If basic essentials are taken care of by the government through free supply or subsidized supply, whatever money is being saved at the household level, this money will get diverted towards, let's say, other nutritious, protein-rich food items like dairy products, milk, or even egg, meat, fish. The consumption of such nutrient-rich, protein-rich items will go up at the household level when you have a scheme like PDS, which is providing the basic supply of food grains. This will also increase the expenditure on non-food items because households will have more money to spend because the government is providing the essential food grains through PDS. So this study, which has been conducted by researchers based on the data from Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, it highlights the role of PDS. It highlights how PDS is linked to social welfare and poverty levels. So first, let's understand who brings out this survey, the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. This could be an important prelims point. It is published by the National Sample Survey Office, the NSSO, which is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So this recent survey data has clearly established that the PDS is playing a very big role in social welfare. By guaranteeing food security, it is helping the poor households to save money which can be spent on other food items and non-food items. So the researchers have accounted for both inclusion and exclusion error in the PDS while making certain assessments. In any scheme like PDS, there will be inclusion and exclusion errors. That is, the ineligible beneficiaries might also be benefiting from PDS, right? PDS is meant for BPL families, but there could be others who are not eligible beneficiaries, but still they might be benefiting from it. They might still be accessing the subsidized food grains and free food grains under PDS. There could be exclusion error where eligible beneficiaries are not getting the benefits. They are not able to access the subsidized and free food grains for several reasons. So after accounting for the inclusion and exclusion error, the researchers have identified two metrics. One is monthly per capita consumption expenditure of a household, and the other is value of household consumption in a month. These are very important metrics and both are very different. Let me explain what's the difference as well. Monthly per capita consumption expenditure, MPCE, at the household level, it tells you what expenditure is a household incurring per month on a per capita basis. Let's say in a household there are 5 people, right? So on an individual basis, how much expenditure is being incurred on essential items, food and non-food items? That provides your monthly per capita, which is being spent by the household on essential and basic items. Now, value of household consumption in a month is a different metric. This tells you the overall consumption that a family is making in a month, which includes the free subsidized items being provided, and it also includes the out-of-pocket expenditure of the family. For example, a household might be spending some money on certain food items like dairy or other protein-rich items. They might be incurring more expenditure on healthcare, maybe insurance, education, transportation, etc. So there are some expenditures which are happening which is free of cost or subsidized by the government through social welfare programs like PDS. And other than that, there is some out-of-pocket expenditure being incurred by families. So when you take both of them into account cumulatively, that provides your value of household consumption. It tells you what a particular household is consuming on a monthly basis. It gives you great insight about consumption levels in rural and urban areas, which is a vital tool for policymakers and lawmakers. So by using these metrics, the researchers are arguing that PDS has without a doubt, it has had a huge impact as far as food security is concerned. They're pointing out that expenditure at the household level has been reduced thanks to schemes like PDS, which means poor households now have more money which they can spend on other food items which are not free or not subsidized, thus accessing nutrient-rich, protein-rich food items, and they can also spend more on non-food essentials like healthcare and education and transportation, etc., which brings overall welfare for the poor households in the country. So this is clearly established that out-of-pocket expenditure can be used by the households to meet other essentials if the government takes care of few essentials at least, such as food grains, through the PDS system. So this has great implications for even estimating the poverty line. Poverty line has been estimated by various committees, including the Tendulkar committee, by using calorific value or expenditure level at the household. Right, on a per day basis, how much minimum expenditure has to be incurred by a family. This has always been a criteria for measuring poverty levels. So if value of consumption is taken into account, that includes the government welfare being provided free of cost or the subsidized government welfare, plus out-of-pocket expenditure being incurred by the family. If this is used as a metric, this can be a more reliable tool to estimate poverty. This can have a great impact in the future planning of welfare programs, which means the government would be driven to increase such social welfare programs where in-kind social transfers are done. Instead of only providing direct cash benefit, PDS system provides the intended commodity directly into the hand of the household. Food grains are being directly delivered. So such in-kind social transfers, right, they do work. They work at the grassroots. They help the poor families save money and use that additional money to increase their out-of-pocket expenditure to spend on other food items and non-food items, which brings overall welfare in the country. That is what we learn from this article, which has been published on page number 6. Now let's move on to another interesting article on page 7. This article is focused on the Xinjiang region of China. It's talking about freedom and control in Xinjiang, where China faces a lot of allegations and accusations. Recently, China invited a number of journalists from around the world to visit the Xinjiang region, and this writer, the writer of the column, was also one of the journalists invited. So the writer is presenting a picture about the critical Xinjiang region. So let's quickly understand why is this region so important, how is it relevant for India. So I'll explain all the important details. It's a very important discussion because there can be prelims or even mains questions based on whatever we are going to discuss. See, the northwest province of China, located over here, this is the Xinjiang province of China. Historically, the region has been part of Chinese empires. Ancient medieval times, various Chinese empires have controlled this region as well. But there have been instances where it has been more associated with Central Asia, with other empires that controlled Central Asia and other regions over here. So in 1949, after the PRC was established, the People's Republic of China was established, the Communist Party, which came to power following the Chinese Civil War, it quickly expanded the territory of China, because Mao Zedong, the leader, believed in expansion of China, territorial expansion of China, to restore the ancient lost glory of China. So that is how Inner Mongolia was annexed and Chinese territory was significantly expanded. Similarly, Xinjiang was annexed when PLA troops marched into Xinjiang and brought this whole region under China's control. And later, in 1950, similarly, they would annex Tibet as well. So this is how China quickly expanded its territory, and overnight it became a neighbor of India. Imagine, if not for its annexation of Xinjiang and Tibet, China wouldn't have been India's neighbor. So Xinjiang is of great strategic, historical, economic and cultural significance because it borders India. Can you see the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir as it existed in 1947? Right? This entire territory is Indian territory, without a doubt. But our neighbors, Pakistan and China, are in illegal occupation of some territory here. You can see the line of control over here. This is Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which Pakistan has illegally occupied from India in 1947. This is line of actual control, the temporary border with China, where China has illegally occupied Aksai Chin. This is where China triggered the boundary dispute with India in 1950s and occupied Aksai Chin during the 1962 war. So these Indian territories, which are under the illegal occupation of Pakistan and China, they share borders with Xinjiang. Even the strategic Siachen Glacier, which India controls over here, which is located at the tri-junction of this point, right? That is India, POK and Aksai Chin, where Pakistan and China are illegally occupying our territory. That is where the Siachen Glacier is located. Right to the north of this, you have the Xinjiang province of China. This is where you have a territory called the Shaksgam Valley, which Pakistan has leased to China illegally. This is where Shaksgam Valley is present. It's supposed to be part of POK, which is essentially Indian territory. But in 1963, Pakistan-China signed an agreement and Pakistan leased Shaksgam Valley to China. And China today has built projects and stationed troops at Shaksgam Valley, which is Indian territory. Right to the north of this, you have the strategic Xinjiang region. So Xinjiang has a rich history behind it. It was part of the ancient Silk Route. Since ancient times, it has been vital for trade in this region, centered around China, that is East Asia, South Asia, Central Asia and even Europe. Be it precious commodities, from precious metals to even silk and even other precious items, they were all traded through this route, and Xinjiang has been right at the center. There are historical links between the Indian civilization and Xinjiang as well. So you have a very diverse culture in Xinjiang. There are many ethnic groups present over here. The natives of Xinjiang are the Uyghur Muslims. The Uyghurs are the native ethnic minority present over here, right? The native ethnic community present. They are a minority if you take the whole of China into account, right? In China, Uyghur Muslims of Xinjiang are a minority, but within Xinjiang, Uyghurs are obviously in majority. Apart from the Uyghur Muslims, there are many other Central Asian tribes and ethnic groups present over here. You have the Kazakhs, the Kyrgyz and the Tajiks, Uzbeks from Central Asia, and even few Russians as well. So it's a very diverse region culturally, ethnically. It's a very diverse region. There are at least 56 ethnic groups. And there's also a lot of religious diversity present. Islam, of course, is the dominant religion of Xinjiang, but even Buddhism, Taoism, which comes from mainland China, and Christianity are also found in decent numbers. But China has tried to enforce its view, its ideology. The Communist Party, which has established authoritarian rule in the country, imposes communist views on Xinjiang. So since Xinjiang was brought under the PRC's control, the Uyghurs in particular have resisted this. The Uyghurs have resisted the PRC control, and they also have issues with the Han community, who are the majority community in China. If you take the whole of China into account, the majority ethnic group are the Han Chinese. Is that clear? So Uyghurs are in minority at the national level. So the Uyghurs have felt that Hans have discriminated against them. The Communist Party has discriminated and violated their basic rights, including their religious rights. So there has always been this clash, because the Communist Party does not support any religion. In fact, it tries to stamp down on religion. So this leads to a direct standoff between Uyghur Muslims, the authoritarian Chinese state, and the Han ethnic majority. So as a result, Xinjiang has seen a lot of trouble. There have been clashes between Uyghurs and Chinese forces, and some of the Uyghurs who are connected with Central Asia and AFPAC region, they have fallen prey to extremism and radicalism, and they have established a terrorist outfit called ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement. It's one of the major terrorist outfits operating in the Central Asia, Eurasia region, and its goal is to liberate Xinjiang from China. It wants to break Xinjiang from here and unite with some Central Asian regions and form an independent Islamic state called East Turkestan. So this outfit has carried out many attacks against China in major cities like Urumqi, Kashgar. These are the major commercial centers of Xinjiang. Several attacks have taken place, and even in other parts of China, ETIM has tried to carry out attacks. So China has retaliated, obviously, with brutal force against any such extremism, and it has targeted the entire Uyghur community. Uyghurs have been targeted by the Chinese state in the name of de-radicalization and counter-terrorism. See, there might be few extremists, but you can't target the entire community, the entire ethnic group. That is exactly what China has done. In the name of counter-terrorism and de-radicalization, China has oppressed the Uyghur community, and that is the allegation that exists. There are strong allegations, especially in Western media and even by Western governments, US and European countries. They allege that China has committed gross human rights violations in Xinjiang. Is that clear? China has established these detention centers where lakhs of Uyghurs have been detained. According to a New York Times report, more than 1 or 2 million Uyghur Muslims have been held in these detention centers, which China calls as re-education camps. China calls them re-education camps, which focuses on de-radicalization. In these so-called re-education camps, it's reported that China is forcing the Uyghur Muslims to commit acts against their religion, which is a violation of human rights, which is a crime against humanity. For example, it's been reported that Uyghur Muslims who are held here in these so-called re-education camps, they're forced to consume alcohol and pork meat, both of which are haram in Islam, in the Islamic faith. So China has apparently resorted to such brutal practices, and it's accused of committing human rights violations, and the issue has come up at global platforms as well, at the UN Human Rights Council, and even international NGOs like Human Rights Watch, HRW. Right? They've all raised this issue, and US has imposed sanctions also against few Chinese officials. The US has targeted China with sanctions for such human rights violations which have been committed in Tibet and in Xinjiang. That is why the topic is so important for us. The journalist who traveled to Xinjiang is presenting both sides of the story present in Xinjiang. The writer is talking about the alleged human rights violations, how Uyghurs feel oppressed. But there are other section of Uyghur Muslims who feel that these accusations are greatly exaggerated. The journalist has met with other religious leaders at the legendary Shaanxi Mosque, which is a historic cultural site in Xinjiang, where some of the Uyghur Muslims, they don't feel discriminated. They say that this is all a foreign conspiracy, right? They say that religion has to adopt principles of socialism and it has to adapt with China's political structure. So there are some Uyghurs who are comfortable with the Chinese state and its communist ideology. But of course, there are other Uyghurs as well who feel that they are discriminated and targeted. And there are some who have been radicalized and taken up terrorism as well. So this represents the complex situation of Xinjiang and how China has dealt with it. And it is extremely crucial for India because we closely watch all these developments. Recently, few Uyghur Muslims who fled from here, they entered Ladakh and they have been detained by ITBP. They knew they can't go to Pakistan because Pakistan, which is a good friend of China, would hand them back to China, right? So they infiltrated into India, crossed over the borders and entered Ladakh, where they have been arrested by the ITBP and they have been placed in a detention center. So any potential humanitarian crisis could adversely affect India. We have direct stakes in this because the Belt and Road Initiative of China passes through Xinjiang. In fact, Xinjiang is absolutely critical. There are many critical road and railway lines and oil pipelines which China has established that connects with Central Asia and towards Europe. All these infrastructure projects of Belt and Road Initiative pass through Xinjiang. And there is one component which is the CPEC corridor, which is of direct concern for India, which passes from Xinjiang to Pakistan. It connects the commercial city of Kashgar with the strategic ports of Gwadar and Karachi in Pakistan, right? China has funded the construction of Gwadar port. It's building road, rail and power projects in Pakistan as part of CPEC. And India is strongly opposed to the project as the project breaches our sovereignty in Kashmir. In the Gilgit-Baltistan region, right, from Shaksgam Valley to POK, these Chinese projects which pass through Indian claimed territory is a breach of Indian sovereignty. That's why we have strongly opposed the CPEC project because of its alignment, because of the route of the project which passes through Indian territory from Shaksgam Valley to POK, then into Pakistan. So India has opposed this and that's why we boycotted the Belt and Road Initiative. And what is ironic is that China, which always protects Pakistan with regard to its sponsorship of terrorism, it only takes issue with regard to the support that ETIM has enjoyed in the AFPAC region. This is the last point I would like to make here. It's a very interesting point, very important point as well. See, generally, China has not supported India when it comes to targeting Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. In fact, in many ways, China has shielded Pakistan and protected Pakistan. For example, at UN Security Council, we have used the Sanctions Committee, 1267 Sanctions Committee, to designate Pakistani terrorists. But China is the one which has protected Pakistan. China has tolerated Pakistan's activities involving extremism and terrorism. But only when it comes to ETIM, China is worried, China is concerned. So look at the hypocrisy of China. Why? Because ETIM elements, they have connections in AFPAC region. They are linked to other terrorist organizations present in the Afghanistan-Pakistan belt. This is the only reason why China worries about Pakistan sponsored terrorism. And believe it or not, China asks India for help at SCO to counter terrorism present in this Central Asia region. While China doesn't help India to target Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, which is mainly focused on India. Right? So that is how geopolitics works. China's worry is about groups like ETIM, which are linked with other radical forces in Central Asia and AFPAC region. And China pressurizes Pakistan only to deal with this threat. It even seeks help from India, Russia and others at SCO to counter terrorism in the region. But it never helps India to pressurize Pakistan or to target terrorism which is aimed at India. In fact, it has shielded Pakistan and protected Pakistan-sponsored terrorism against India. So that is what we take away from this important article. It gives you a lot of insight regarding the strategic significance of Xinjiang and how is it a part of a great game which is going on in this region. The US is a major player here. The US has active presence. It's backing some of the Uyghur groups, and there are reports that US might be involved in backing ETIM. though US denies the allegations. That's what China says. China says that this is an entire conspiracy of the global powers. So you're witnessing a great game competition going on here between US and China. Obviously, Russia is also a significant player because it wouldn't want any destabilization of the region. India, Pakistan are also major players as far as this great game is concerned. So based on this, take up this question. Please write an answer to this. In such a question, it's advised that you draw a map, a rough map, to show where Xinjiang is located and why it is strategically important. Next, a small update on India-US relations. On page 8, we have this article, according to which the national security advisors of India and US have held talks with each other following PM Modi's visit to Russia. As we discussed the other day, the US has not been happy with the close relations between India and Russia, and especially the recent visit of PM Modi to Moscow and his interaction with Putin has been strongly criticized by the US leadership. Many top leaders in the US, even the American media, they have been openly critical of India's policy, and the NSA, India's NSA, Ajit Doval, has reached out to the NSA of US, Jack Sullivan, to explain why Russia is crucial to India, to explain how India has taken a balanced position between US and Russia. But the US rejects this argument of India. It has stated that India cannot rely on Russia because any day Russia will align with China. The US is telling India that India can't focus on any long-term relations with Russia because there is no long-term future for this, according to the US. Because any day Russia would back China, according to the US, in case of any conflict between India and China. So US is urging India to see the reality and align with Western countries. But India knows very well that US is obsessed with its own self-interests. As we discussed the other day, Russia has been an all-weather friend for India. We have critical relations with Russia, which is honestly very important, maybe as important as our ties with the West and the US. So India maintains this balanced position, this position of multi-alignment, but the US cannot understand or digest this fact. And as always, it has targeted India, criticized India for the close relations that we have maintained with Russia. So this also highlights one of the weak points in India-US relations. The US ambassador has said that India-US relations might be strong enough, but it's not deep enough to withstand the impact of India-Russia relations. US leaders have been quite aggressive in criticizing India. That shows the weak points in India-US relations as well. Other than that, the two NSAs have discussed the Quad grouping because there are some important meetings of the Quad which is coming up, the foreign ministers meeting of the Quad, and this is related to Indo-Pacific. Through the Quad, India, US and Japan and Australia, they are working together to stabilize the Indo-Pacific and to counter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. So it shows that even though we have many areas of cooperation with US, we have strategic relations with the US, but still there is a point of friction, which is India's relations with Russia. And India cannot compromise those critical ties with Russia just because of American interests. Right? So that is what we take away from here. It also explains our policy of strategic autonomy, how we maintain an independent foreign policy. Now let's head towards the prelim section. Let's take a quick look at the smaller articles in the newspaper. On the front page, we have an article related to inflation. CPI data has been brought out. Consumer price inflation, which gives you retail inflation data. Now, can you tell me in the comments which organization brings out the CPI inflation data? Mention that in the comments. That's another small exercise for you. So through this article, we can understand some very important concepts. We can understand the difference between three types of inflation which is measured. One is food inflation, which has been reported in the article. According to the article, food inflation has jumped to a staggering 9.4% due to supply side problems created by bad weather and extreme monsoons and heat waves. Crops have been destroyed, and also due to weakness in agri-logistics, right? India has seen drastic rise in food inflation where food prices have shot up. So according to the data, food inflation has been registered at 9.4% for the month of June. All right, whereas headline inflation has been reported at 5.1%. Due to the significant jump in food inflation, headline inflation also has jumped. So what do you mean by headline inflation and how is it different from core inflation? Is that clear? And what range of inflation is good for the economy? What is the tolerable limit of inflation, of CPI inflation? That's what we should understand. See, headline inflation, which is computed through the CPI index, consumer price index, it provides you the rise in prices which is happening on a month-to-month basis as compared to the past year, right? And it helps you understand the inflation level, the rise in prices which is taking place based on a basket of goods which are surveyed to calculate the CPI index. So there are some food items, some fuel items and energy related items and other essential items which are part of the basket of goods. The prices are tracked and a CPI index is computed which gives you the headline inflation number, right? This is generally the overall retail inflation in the country. So you have CPI inflation for rural economy, for industrial workers, for urban areas, etc. So all of this is computed by one organization and I want you to find out which organization is this. But problem with headline inflation is that it is very vulnerable for changes happening in food inflation and energy prices. Because fuel and energy prices are very volatile. It's dependent on global oil markets. Similarly, food inflation is very volatile. It's dependent on weather and various other conditions. So this may not be the right metric for policymakers. So that is why there is another inflation metric where food and energy inflation is taken out from headline inflation, and this is nothing but your core inflation. So core inflation is basically headline inflation minus food inflation and energy inflation. You take out the volatile elements and what you get is core inflation. So the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI, which is responsible for tackling inflation, it primarily looks at all these metrics, but the benchmark is headline inflation, CPI, and the tolerable range is basically 4% is the target which has been given to the Monetary Policy Committee, but with a tolerable range of plus or minus 2%. So inflation between 2 to 6% is tolerable, but ideally it should be around 4%. That is what, that is the target essentially which has been given to the Monetary Policy Committee. So headline inflation at 5.1 is still within tolerable limits. It's still under 6%, but there are indications that it is increasing mainly due to volatility with food inflation which has jumped to 9.4%. Next, we have an article related to polity. The Government of India has notified the 25th of June to be marked as Samvidhaan Hatya Divas. Constitution Assassination Day is going to be marked on 25th of June, and this seems to be a major step and quite a drastic step as well, which has triggered a lot of political controversy. Because on 25th of June, back in 1975, the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi displayed dictatorial tendencies and imposed the state of emergency, thus eroding Indian democracy. A great disservice was done to Indian democracy on this day, when then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi assumed a dictatorial authoritarian role and imposed a state of emergency that curbed political and civil rights and fundamental rights in the country. So the Government of India is designating this day to highlight the importance of the Constitution, the need to protect the Constitution from such authoritarian forces, and to highlight the atrocities committed during the emergency by the abuse of power under the then government, and also to pay tribute to those who fought against the imposition of emergency. But of course, there is a clear political overtone to this. Opposition parties have alleged that the government is just trying to politicize the issue. However condemnable the emergency was, marking a day to highlight Constitution assassination or Samvidhaan Hatya Divas, right, may not be appropriate according to the opposition parties. So it has triggered a major political controversy, but at least you should know the context in which it has been notified. And also please understand that during the emergency, the Indira Gandhi government adopted the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, which was even called the mini constitution, because several changes were brought in to centralize powers, which was later reversed through the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. At least some of the drastic changes that were done through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, they were reversed through the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act after democracy was restored. So that's what we take away from this article. Coming to the last topic on page 10, we have an article related to environment and ecology. Researchers from the Zoological Survey of India, they have discovered a new species of dogfish shark. It's a shark variant that belongs to the Squalus genus. The Squalus genus of sharks. The Squalus genus of sharks are very unique. They are very popular as well. They have a very unique dorsal fin. They have a very smooth fin, a smooth dorsal fin. And what is really unique about them is that they have spines. They have a spiny structure near the dorsal fin. That is what sets apart the Squalus genus of sharks. So a new species under the dogfish shark has been discovered in Kerala by the Zoological Authority, by the Zoological Survey of India. See, such facts are relevant for prelims because whenever new species are discovered, sometimes UPSC has asked direct questions based on this. So please note that in the Sakti Kulangara harbour in Kerala, this is where the new species of dogfish shark has been discovered, and this entire species is actually considered to be threatened even by IUCN. The Squalus genus of sharks, they are all considered to be threatened because they are hunted for the liver oil which is produced. The liver oil of dogfish shark is highly valuable in the pharmaceutical industry. It has a pharmaceutical application. So there's a lot of hunting and poaching that takes place with regard to this species of shark, and a new species has been discovered, right? And hence conservation protection of the species becomes important. So please note, where has it been discovered, why it faces a threat, why is it exploited, for what reason, and to which genus does it belong. So some basic facts which could help you answer any standard prelims question. Now before I end the session, please note that now we will have a quiz on the Hindu analysis on our Telegram channel. Based on these articles, we will provide you some prelims questions of UPSC standard so that you can revise and practice these questions. So please join the Telegram channel by scanning the QR code or click on the link provided in the description. So that is it for today. On this note, I would like to end the discussion. Let me know how the session was. I hope you found the session to be useful, and I hope you learned something today. So let me know in the comments. Please press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's meet again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Till then, take care. Have a good day. NCERT books are unavoidable to crack the IAS exam. Not only is the content of these books authentic, but these books also help a civil services aspirant to build conceptual clarity. And most importantly, lots of questions in the civil services examination are directly asked from NCERT books. But the aspirants often find it difficult to cover these books, or worse, they even end up ignoring these books. We at Unacademy IAS English are going to make the reading and understanding of the NCERT books easier. We present NCERT Fundamentals course, a free initiative of Unacademy IAS English. What are the highlights of this program? Comprehensive coverage of the most relevant NCERT books for the civil services exam. Prelims and mains practice questions in each session to test your understanding of the fundamental concepts. This course begins from 12th of July every day at 6 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel now.